You know, I don't think I've seen the word optimization or optimized used online for games as much as I have in, I can't even remember when, probably Cyberpunk 2077. Hard to believe that game released almost 2 years ago, and oh boy, the controversy around that game. So, you might be asking yourself, what game has graced us with its bad optimization now? What game is so bad technically that it has the internet in an uproar? Is it another sports game that looks like a 2003 game? Is it another Battlefield game? Yes, that one hurts me personally just because of the franchise and everything. Is it another Battlefield game though that requires another 2 years or more in the quote unquote oven that is development? No, it's actually a game that literally prints money, has millions if not billions of fans around the world, and it's been around since the 90s. If you haven't guessed, I'm talking about Pokemon. To be more specific though, Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. Released this past week on the 18th of November on the Nintendo Switch, the next game in the mainline franchise of the Pokemon games is here, and it has the internet in a buzz and an all-out shouting battle. Kind of like the recent Twitter takeover and how that just worked out perfectly the way everyone thought it would. On one side of the invisible aisle, we have the fans who love Pokemon games regardless of the quality. They just want to catch their favorite Pokemon, make the teams that they've always loved, and try to incorporate some of the new Pokemon from Gen 9. On the other side, however, though, you have fans of the series, but they're really tired of things that are getting cut, games looking like they're from the early 2000s still, being stuck in these back-end ways of making games, removal of mechanics, introducing things that they don't like, and the list just goes on. These two sides have always been butting heads for as long as I can remember, and whenever social media eventually came into the works of things. Then in the middle, you kind of have the quote-unquote regular fans who definitely recognize the issues, but they just still enjoy the games because they're fun. Regardless of what side of the aisle you are on though, everyone knows that when a new Pokemon game releases, it's going to print money for both Nintendo and the Pokemon Company. It's been a constant run for them for over the last 20 years, and it shows no sign of slowing down. However, Gen 9 really seems to have put the franchise into the spotlight, and not in a good way. With the release of Scarlet and Violet, the topics of better hardware, optimization, development time, and more are at the forefront of every discussion. Also included in the discussion is game mechanics, what has been added, what has been taken away from the franchise, and what is good going forward for said franchise that is Pokemon. With all the above information we just talked about, we have 2 questions we need to ask ourselves as gamers when it comes to the Pokemon series. And by the way, this isn't just relating to Pokemon, this can relate to anything else in gaming going forward. But for this video, a lot of it will focus on the Switch and the Pokemon games. Would simply optimizing Scarlet and Violet fix the game to run as we expect games to be on the Switch? Or is the Switch hardware so old that it's the reason Scarlet and Violet are running so poorly, and just throwing better hardware at it will fix everything? What's going on, everyone? Talon here with 59 Direct, and today we are going to discuss Pokemon Scarlet and Violet and the relationship this has brought with optimization, hardware, mechanics, and more as we dive into this deep waters of these games. Real quick before we get into the meat of this video, if you enjoyed the video, please consider leaving a like and subscribing to the channel if you happen to be new. I know it's really tiring to hear this from everybody, but it really does help out not only the video and the algorithm, but it really helps the channel as well. Plus, it lets us know that you like these types of videos and everything. However, if you dislike the video, leave a dislike and leave a comment down below on what we can do to improve our videos moving forward into the future. We always appreciate constructive criticism. Also, don't forget to check out our other socials that you're seeing on the page right now and links down below in the description. We update many things there as always. All right, let's begin. Now, I hope this is obvious, but I want to make a couple of things really clear before we proceed forward. First, I'm not a game developer, obviously, but I do know people who have worked in programming most of their life in both states and in Japan where I currently live. For this video, I did not just simply listen to a single video and call it good. I've researched terms, talked with other people, watched other sources who have a history of knowing what they're talking about when it comes to game development and just coding in general, and then I cross-reference all of those sources with each other. So hopefully I can present all this information in a clear way that hopefully won't make it too confusing, but regardless, sometimes I'm gonna make mistakes myself. So if I get tongue twisted or anything, I'll try to leave as many comments down below, kind of addressing certain things if I feel like I wasn't able to get them across as best as I possibly wanted to, but I'm just letting you guys know that, so make sure you check the pinned comment if I put anything there that maybe I missed or want to include on any further research I find after this video has gone live. Also, just by having this information now, I am by no means a professional. I want simply to present my findings to you, and hopefully we can start a discussion to try and clear up some of the information that's going on out there, because if there's one thing these two games have done, it has brought a lot of information to the forefront of everyone's discussions and asking what is good hardware, what is good optimization, and what do we need to know going forward? Is it just one? Is it a mix? Is there a secret behind all of this that we're just not seeing? What's the hidden mystery? First off, let's start with optimization. Is there a basic definition? Well, by doing a quick Google search, actually, you can basically just get this: the action of making the best or most effective use of a situation or resource. So, for example, a company's interest in optimizing its business. Pretty standard definition there, I would say, but how does this apply to games and game development? That usually comes up to a definition like an act or process of making something, such as a design, system, or decision, as fully perfect, functional, or effective as possible. Or a more concentrated definition might be its process of increasing the performance of a video game for better gameplay and visual experiences. So to put it simply, if a game runs well, the mechanics work as they are intended, aka via the code, and little to no crashes, none to minimal bugs and glitches, the game can be considered optimized. But that is easier said than done. It can go all the way back to the beginning of the development of a game. When a game is being made, all of the systems have to be considered, not finalized by any means, but considered when making the game, and how they're going to function. This can obviously determine how advanced something can be or how simple it can be or look. Not saying, by the way, that anything like coding for games is simple, just that's kind of the definition I wanted to go with there. Let's give a quick in-world definition using Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, since that's what we're talking about here. The developers and the teams need to decide on how something in the game needs to function and then make that system in the game. From there, they have to determine if the system they're creating will work well with the current hardware they are given when coding the game, and that the system that's going to be ported to will work as well. Remember, games are made on computers before they are ported over to a console. So let's take this one step further. Let's say GameFreak wants to make an open world that renders everything as it comes into view with no loading doors, and at the same time, they want wild Pokemon to wander around either freely or in a group, who then will break from that path in the coding when they see you, the NPC, get too close to them and they either try to attack you or run away. So they first have to create that, then make sure that it can work within the limits of the system they are coding on and the system that it will eventually run on. So this is essentially what people would call optimization. They are taking the systems that they made, putting it onto a particular console or PC or whatever you're putting it onto, and making sure that it runs as smoothly as possible, which obviously takes a lot of time, money, and resource. A good example of some good optimization on the Switch would be something like the Witcher 3 ports or Doom. Both ports on the Switch, which again, we're keeping it to the Switch, but this can work for anything, run pretty well. In fact, one of the best games to show off optimization is actually Roller Coaster Tycoon. Now, if you're wondering why I brought up this random game here, well, in the words of my best friend who's a professional code monkey, his words not mine, that game can run on a potato, which is a testament to how well it's optimized. It can run well on a variety of different specs, consoles, and systems. All right, I know I just threw a lot of tech lingo at you, so let's take a quick break and let's go on to something like hardware, for example. Obviously, hardware is part of video games and consoles just like optimization is. It's hardware that makes up your consoles and PCs that we play on. Heck, even our phones have hardware, which I know is kind of an obvious statement to make, but I needed to make it because it is true. Now, when it comes to hardware and consoles, let's stick with consoles since that's the main topic of this video. The question always has to be asked is it powerful enough? Or more specifically, how recent is the hardware inside said console and system when it releases, and how relevant it will be going into the future? Now, if you have followed consoles at all, then you know that when a new console is released, the tech on the inside is usually about a year or two old. This allows for costs to go down a little bit so as not to hurt the makers too much, and then usually it will last for about 5 to 7 years. Sometimes we even get slim versions of these consoles as we're halfway through their life, and even pro versions as seen with the PS4 and Xbox One. Then we come to the Switch. Now, by no regards is it any secret that the Switch, and any Nintendo console for that matter, is generally not at the top of the competition in terms of specs themselves. From RAM to CPU and GPU, Nintendo tends to keep its hardware a little bit more simple, which allows them to try for more things. That's kind of how Nintendo's always been seen. Things like Wii, 3DS, and of course, the Switch right now. Big debate among a lot of gamers is when consoles need their next upgrade, and especially for something like the Switch, when will it need that hardware upgrade? Another thing that we have talked about on this channel that is well documented is the Tiger chip that the Switch is based off from NVIDIA. That tech is now coming up on 9 to almost 10 years old. However, NVIDIA, after a few years, actually improved that chip. They made a new one, but improved upon what was done beforehand, and even offered to sell it to Nintendo, who said no thank you for some reason. I don't know why. We covered this in another video, which covers it a little bit more in detail, but for the record, there was a lot of performance left on the table with that new chip, and Nintendo has just basically said no thank you to. So, if you want to see that video, leave it in the top right corner. Go ahead and check it out after this video. It'll give you a little bit more insight as to what Nintendo gave up. Tiny spoiler, it's a lot. They left a lot of power on that table. Due to this, many gamers, especially recently, have been calling for Nintendo to finally give us a Switch Pro. Not the OLED, where a slightly better screen and handheld, but an actual console with more processing power, more teraflops, more GPU, more RAM, something to improve the hardware. Now look, everyone has said it, including me on this channel. The Switch is an amazing piece of hardware when it comes to being both a handheld and a console, and I don't think Nintendo needs to stop doing that. But let's be perfectly honest as well, tech has evolved and the Switch needs an upgrade. It's just a fact. With more powerful hardware, systems can render more pixels, have more complex coding, which allows for things like enemy AI movement, unique attack animations, and facial movements, to name a few of them. So with all that information now, we have optimization and we have hardware. Now, all of this stuff needs to work together to make a game run. A system needs good hardware to run the games it is meant to play, while the developers need to make the game optimized so that it runs as smoothly as possible, and sometimes even potentially on multiple systems. Luckily for the Switch though, 9 times out of 10, it needs to only run on one system. Anytime you have a game that goes to multiple different platforms, and those multiple different platforms have different levels of hardware, make it a little bit more difficult sometimes. That's why sometimes you might see last gen stuff not work as well compared to current gen / PC. In fact, whenever a new console is about to release, or it's generally around that time that we start thinking about the new consoles, we tend to see things like dev kits running around in social media, leaks, etc. Those dev kits that you might have heard of when it comes to game development are connected to computers, which allow the developers to see how the game is going to run / show them the limitations of what they're working. Like it or not, most games are lowered in their scale when they are being made. Especially recently, a lot of developers have actually come out and said they wish they didn't have to make games for these lower specs, because they have to take away mechanics and things in their game that they don't want to. Now, this can be due to either time limits, hardware, or optimization, but usually 9 times out of 10, things are dropped in scale when things start to get made. So, with all the technical stuff covered now, let's circle back to the question we mentioned at the very beginning of this video. Is Pokemon Scarlet and Violet suffering from optimization or from a hardware problem? Well, if you've been looking at all the information we presented in this video, then it should be pretty obvious what it is. It's actually both. Now, before I explain why, I want to show you this little TikTok clip that I found by My Life as an RPG. He makes a great little video about kind of condensing everything that I've kind of talked to you about. So go ahead and take a listen. Don't worry, it's only a minute, but take a listen and then let's talk about it.
Submitted for the approval of the angry, frothing Pokemon masses out there, this is footage of Pokemon Scarlet and Violet running on the PC Ryujinx emulator. This PC has mid-specs at best. No code for the game has been altered whatsoever. And as you can see, it runs fine. It runs at a steady 30 frames per second. It can run at 60, but it will run at double speed. To get it to run at normal speed, you actually do have to alter the code. No glitches, no clipping. It just runs. Even when there's a bunch of Pokemon on screen at once, stuff that would normally cause Pokemon Scarlet and Violet to slow down, it runs just fine. Remember, none of the code has been altered. No memory leaks as time goes on. It's just running on an emulator on a PC. And so I ask you, if this is the performance we get running Pokemon Scarlet and Violet on a PC without altering the code whatsoever, and we get worse performance when we run it on Switch hardware, maybe the problem is the Switch's outdated hardware. Just think about that for a second.
Now, first off, again, shout out to My Life as an RPG. Great little TikTok. Make sure you follow him. All credit to him, obviously, on his own video. So, after watching that video, it would seem that Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, based on the current game we have right now in front of us, needs simply more powerful hardware. It's optimized to run on a system that has more CPU, RAM, and GPU capabilities. Now that we've seen that, and we've said that now, let's take a look at this second clip that he made. It's a little comment that he made to a comment on that video. Just listen to it for a second, and then we're gonna follow up with all those extra details. I promise it's the last clip, but it's really important because obviously I think he knows what he's talking about here. Go ahead and take a listen.
All right, so we're having a discussion here. People are now saying the problem is that Pokemon Scarlet and Violet is not optimized for the Switch, and they keep bringing up other games like Mario Odyssey, Breath of the Wild, Xenoblade Chronicles 3, and say the game should be more like that. Okay, let's talk about this. How would you like to optimize it? Would you like to optimize it like Mario Odyssey? Mario Odyssey had very simple environments. Low poly environments with little behavior to them. It was primarily a platformer, so all the behavior was just movement. There wasn't a whole lot of complexity in enemies. This allowed the camera to render very little as you played Mario Odyssey, allowing the Switch to run very fast. So that would mean simplifying and flattening most of the environments in Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, reducing the amount of things on screen, and simplifying behavior. Is that what you want to do? That is something we can discuss. Breath of the Wild limited the amount of things on screen that could be rendered at once. It had a very active and aggressive spawner and despawner. In addition, there were a limited amount of enemies in Breath of the Wild. There were Bokoblins, Moblins, a couple other things. I think there were only like 10 or something unique enemies, maybe a little bit more, but much less than the amount of Pokemon in Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. So do you want Pokemon to have a limited amount of models, a limited amount of behavior, and limit the amount of enemies that are on screen? That would mean you'd only get like 10 Pokemon on the world map, but we could do that. Is that the game you want? Xenoblade Chronicles 3 reuses behavior and models for a lot of enemies, relying on recolors, a lot like Breath of the Wild did. Its enemy behavior is fairly simple, and it keeps the camera very tight so that it doesn't have to render a lot on screen. It also has very vertical environments, which can basically act to hide other parts of the map, which it will not draw. And to traverse these maps, it usually pushes you into corridors or forces you to climb cliffs via particular ladders or something like that. This more limited traversal means that the game doesn't have to try as much to render a whole world. Is this something you would want to do? Optimization is the act of cutting certain things out and using certain tricks to make a game look like it's running better on worse hardware. And optimization is usually baked into a game's design. Optimization is not just a button you can press to make the game better. It's not changing some lines of code and then the game's better. It's literally changing the design to help the game run better on its hardware. And this is what I've been trying to get at from the beginning. Yes, Pokemon Scarlet and Violet should be optimized for the Switch. What would you do to optimize it? Everyone keeps screaming, rabble, rabble, optimize it, rabble, rabble, just make it better. What would you do? What tricks would you do to get it running better? That's the discussion we should be having. To get it running better, you need to change the game. How would you change it? For what return? That's what we want to know.
So, according to him, if we want Pokemon Scarlet to run on the current Switch system, then things obviously need to be optimized. However, like he states in his video, what do we do to make that optimized? It's not just simply hitting a button to optimize something. We have to take something away. We have to change how something works. And because the way the game is made and what is baked into it, it's a lot easier said than done. And as you saw in the clip, a lot of people were bringing up well, what about X game like Zelda, Xenoblade, and other games that look amazing on the Switch? Why can't Pokemon do that? Again, he explains the stuff on how they optimize those games and what those games do differently than what Pokemon does. Now, that is not to take away from what those developers have done. They have done amazing work on the Switch, and we have to give them credit for that. But Pokemon is a different game in some aspect as well. Again, in that clip, he talked about Zelda and how the enemies are and how they work with rendering distance. In Mario, he talked about what is in those worlds when it came to Mario Odyssey. And things like Xenoblade, he talked about how you have tall environments that allow you to not have to render more in the distance and only focus upon what's in front of you and the enemy animations. Again, there's probably different examples as well, and there's more out there, especially for different games. But regardless, those are just some examples. But let's circle back to what we need to ask ourselves and really look at what we want. How do we get Pokemon to a state that we all consider optimized? What do we take away? What do we potentially add or change how something works? do we get Game Freak to cut back on the vision of a fully open world Pokemon game with tons of Pokemon running around? Do we go back to a system like Legends Arceus? Or, and this is a two-parter by the way that I've been seeing online a lot recently, do Nintendo and the Pokemon Company need to finally start giving Game Freak more time and money to actually optimize the current game that they're being made? Optimization, as I said before, takes time and a lot of money. But for a company like Pokemon, and the Pokemon Company and Nintendo itself, make a lot of money. You'd think they would be able to throw a little bit more money into the budget there. I know there's obviously the side of it with the media and when a new gen comes out and the anime and all that stuff, but regardless, a little ridiculous at this point. Or do we need to simply get rid of Game Freak or maybe bring another team on so that we can have something where they work on one game and this other team works on another game and they go back and forth so we don't have to deal with this kind of time constraint anymore? Again, I have to ask, what is the answer? Well, there really is no one answer. Again, a lot of people are always calling recently for the removal of Game Freak, get a new development team in here. But if the schedule is not that great, regardless of who's working on it, maybe it doesn't matter until the Pokemon Company really starts to take this kind of thing serious and they start to see a dip in their sales. Or maybe it's the heads of Game Freak, not necessarily the developers, which, by the way, 99% of the time, it's not the developers. It's the higher-ups of these companies, regardless if they're a development team or not. It's usually the higher-ups. I mean, Game Freak itself only has 189 employees, compared to something like Sony Santa Monica has over 400. Kind of tells you how understaffed they are. Or is it that the people working at Game Freak just don't know how to code at these higher levels now once they went 3D? Maybe we need to have some new blood in the team to help them get through some of this stuff. Again, there's multiple different answers when it comes to this, and there's not just simply one answer. However, based on the clip from my life, it seems to run pretty well on a system with better specs. Most fans of these games I know are loving the open world, so we have to look at a couple other options as always. Either we keep the open world for this generation, but cut back on the Pokemon in the game or the ones that appear on screen, or we go back to a more open area type style with Legends Arceus. Or we have to get a more powerful system. We can't just, something has to give. There has to be something, because unless everyone literally stopped buying the Pokemon game, guess what? They're gonna keep making millions and billions of dollars and they're not gonna change the way they do things. So something has to change. And who knows, maybe getting a Switch Pro will allow the developers to keep their vision intact and do that going forward as well. I mean, heck, remember Cyberpunk 2077? PC worked for the most part, but last gen consoles, they needed way more time in the oven to get optimized because they had to cut a lot of those systems back because those systems could not handle it. It's pretty common knowledge for that kind of stuff, but regardless, that's kind of the same thing that's happening here with the Switch and Pokemon right now. The big question that I keep asking over and over again, what is the answer? So again, I ask one final time, what option do we pick? What is the correct answer? All right, we have finally reached the end of this video. Lots of information that we went over and lots of opinions and things to take into consideration when it comes to the future of gaming, not just for Pokemon, but other things going forward into the future. Although again, we focused a lot on that. As time goes forward, we need to start asking some of these questions more and more. What's important to us as gamers? For some, it's simply looking at pretty games. For some, it's optimization. For others, it's having good frame rates and smoothness. What side are you on though? That's what every single one of us has to ask ourselves. What should Pokemon do? What should all Switch games do? What should the next PlayStation and Xbox systems do? There's a lot of answers we don't know, but we need to start having some of these conversations and we need to start speaking with our wallets when things don't go the way that they should. Come on, Pokemon again makes billions and billions of dollars every year. A lot again coming from cards and the media and everything. But the games make a lot as well, and they deserve as much time and respect as these other things do. It's time that we finally get the Pokemon game that we all deserve. So again, let us know all your thoughts down below in the comments as always. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like and sub to the channel if you happen to be new. Helps us out a lot, and hopefully this video can then get out into the algorithm and more people can see it, and we can start to have discussions about this as well. Anyway, everyone, I've been Talon with 59 Direct. Thank you so much for everyone that stopped by the video and for getting all the way to the end here. Again, if you enjoyed it, give us a like and a sub. Always appreciate it. We hope to see you guys in the next video, and we can't wait to talk about the next topic. We'll catch you in the next one. John A.